Hi, you think you're watching this video. You think you're sitting there, alert, aware, taking in the world around you exactly as it is. You think your memories are accurate, your decisions are rational, and your opinions are based on evidence. Your brain is nodding along right now, going, yeah, totally, that sounds right. Your brain is also the one lying to you, so let's talk about that. Here's the thing nobody tells you in the first week of psychology class. Your brain is not a camera. It doesn't record reality and play it back. It's a storyteller. It takes fragmented, incomplete, often messy information from the world and fills in the blanks, edits the gaps, and hands you a finished version that feels like the truth. The reason this matters is that the edits happen without your permission, without your awareness, and without a disclaimer at the bottom. Every second of every day, your brain is constructing your experience of reality, and it gets things wrong constantly. Not because you're stupid, because that's what brains do. Let's go through exactly how. Start with perception, because this is where the lying begins. You assume your eyes are showing you the world. They're not. Your eyes send raw electrical signals to the brain, and the brain builds a picture. It fills in your blind spot, the literal hole in your vision where the optic nerve connects, with whatever it assumes should be there based on the surrounding context. You have a gap in your vision right now, and you have no idea because your brain quietly covered it up. It does this constantly, smoothing, guessing, patching. What you see is not the world, it's your brain's best guess about the world. And it's not just visual. Your brain predicts almost everything before it happens, then checks if reality matches. This is called predictive processing. Most of what you experience isn't incoming information. It's your brain's forecast, updated slightly when something doesn't match. You walk into a coffee shop expecting it to smell like coffee, and your brain starts generating that experience before you've even fully inhaled. This makes the brain fast and efficient. It also means you experience what you expect to experience as much as what's actually there. Now here's where it gets weird. Attention. You think you're paying attention to your surroundings right now. You're not even close. Human attention is brutally selective, and the brain glosses over almost everything outside its current focus. This is called inattentional blindness, and the most famous demonstration of it is a study by psychologists Christopher Chabris and Daniel Simons, where they asked people to watch a video and count how many times a team passed a basketball. About half the people watching completely missed a person in a gorilla suit walking through the middle of the scene, beating their chest and walking off. 50%. Gorilla, chest beating, invisible, because they were focused on counting. Your attention is not a wide-angle lens. It's a spotlight. Everything outside it basically doesn't exist to your brain. Next time you're absolutely certain you saw something, remember the gorilla. Let's talk about memory, because this is where psychology gets genuinely unsettling. Everyone treats their memories like video recordings. Something happened, the brain filed it, you can retrieve it later. That is not how memory works at all. Memory is reconstructive. Every time you recall something, you're not playing back a file. You're rebuilding the event from fragments, and in the process you update it, alter it, and contaminate it with everything you've thought or felt or heard about it since. The memory you pull up today is not the same memory you stored originally. It has been edited every single time you've remembered it. Elizabeth Loftus, one of the most important psychologists of the last century, spent decades demonstrating exactly how easy it is to plant false memories in people's minds. In one of her classic studies, she showed people footage of a car accident, and then asked different groups questions afterward, using different words. One group was asked how fast the cars were going when they smashed into each other. Another group was asked the same question using the word contacted. The smashed group remembered the cars going faster, and a week later they were also significantly more likely to report having seen broken glass at the scene. There was no broken glass. The word in a question changed what people remembered seeing. If that doesn't make you uncomfortable, you're not paying attention. Loftus later showed that entirely fabricated memories, things that never happened, can be implanted in a large minority of people just through suggestion and repeated prompting. People have confessed to crimes they didn't commit partly because the interrogation process itself created false memories of doing them. Memory is not a recording, it's a story you keep editing. Now let's get into cognitive biases, the specific ways your brain shortcuts its way into being wrong. A cognitive bias is a systematic pattern of deviation from rational thinking, which is psychology's way of saying your brain takes shortcuts that reliably produce errors. There are hundreds of documented ones. Let's hit the ones wrecking your life the most. Confirmation bias. This is the big one. Your brain loves to be right. It loves it so much that it will selectively notice, remember, and search for information that confirms what you already believe and quietly filter out anything that contradicts it. You form a belief, and then the brain essentially spends its time building a case for that belief rather than testing it. You decide you're bad at maths, and suddenly every time you make a calculation error, it confirms the belief, and every time you get one right, it gets filed under luck. This is why smart people hold wrong beliefs just as stubbornly as anyone else. Intelligence doesn't protect you from confirmation bias. If anything, being smarter just means you're better at rationalizing the wrong conclusion. Anchoring bias. The first number you hear about anything becomes the reference point your brain evaluates everything else against, whether or not that number is remotely relevant. Negotiating salary? Whatever number gets named first anchors the entire conversation. In studies, people asked to spin a wheel that randomly stopped on 10 or 65, then immediately asked unrelated questions like how many countries are in Africa, gave systematically higher estimates if the wheel landed on 65. The random number from a wheel biased their answers to a trivia question. Pricing a product at $99 instead of $100 works, not because people can't add a penny, but because the anchor is 99, and 99 lives in your brain closer to 90-something than 100. Anchoring is why everything you buy feels like a deal even when it isn't. The availability heuristic. Your brain estimates how likely something is based on how easily an example comes to mind. If you can think of one quickly, the brain concludes it must be common. This is how fear works completely out of proportion to actual risk. Plane crashes are terrifying and extensively covered, so your brain generates them immediately and concludes flying is dangerous. Car accidents are so routine they barely get reported, so your brain doesn't generate them nearly as fast and concludes driving is safer. In reality, driving is orders of magnitude more dangerous per mile. The same dynamic makes people overestimate the risk of crime after watching true crime documentaries, overestimate the frequency of lottery wins after seeing a winner on the news, and underestimate the dangers of the genuinely boring things quietly killing people in large numbers. The news isn't just informing your worldview, it's actively distorting your probability estimates. The Dunning-Kruger effect. Two psychologists, David Dunning and Justin Kruger, ran a study in 1999 where they found that people with the least knowledge in a domain, things like grammar, logic, and humor, were consistently the most confident in their own ability and consistently the worst at recognizing their own incompetence. The reason is clean. To know that you're bad at something, you need enough knowledge to recognize what good looks like. If you have no knowledge, you have no benchmark. You can't see what you're missing. As people learn more, confidence initially drops because they start to realize how much they don't know, then rises again as genuine competence develops. This explains why the person in every group chat with the strongest opinions on economics, medicine, and geopolitics is usually the one who read 2 articles about it last month. Loss aversion. This one comes from behavioral economics researchers Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky. But it belongs in every psychology conversation because it's baked into how your brain weighs decisions. Losing something hurts roughly twice as much as gaining the equivalent thing feels good. Losing $20 feels about twice as bad as finding $20 feels good. This asymmetry warps every decision you make involving risk. You keep investments that are going down because selling would make the loss real. You stay in situations that aren't working because leaving feels like losing something you already have, even when staying is objectively worse. Insurance companies, casinos, and subscription services are all built on this one exploit. The sunk cost fallacy is loss aversion's most destructive cousin. You've already spent money, time, or energy on something, and now you keep going, not because it's a good idea, but because you don't want the original investment to feel wasted. You sit through the remaining 2 hours of the worst film you've ever seen because you already watched the first hour. You stay in a degree you hate because you've already done 2 years of it. You keep paying for the gym membership you haven't used in 4 months because canceling would mean admitting the sign-up was a mistake. The money and time are already gone either way. They are gone whether you continue or quit. The only question is what you do next. Your brain will not let you see it that way. Now let's talk about how other people break your brain. Because individual biases are one thing, but social psychology is where things get truly disturbing. Solomon Asch ran a series of experiments in the 1950s where he put a participant in a room with several other people, all of whom were secretly working with the researchers. The group was shown a line, then shown 3 comparison lines, and asked which one matched the original. One of the comparisons was obviously correct, but the people working with the researchers all gave the same wrong answer first. About 75% of participants went along with the group's wrong answer at least once, despite being able to see perfectly well that it was wrong. Not because they were convinced it was right, because the social pressure of disagreeing with a group was more powerful than the evidence in front of their eyes. You think you'd be in the 25% who held firm. Statistically, that's probably not right. Stanley Milgram ran an experiment in the 1960s that was so disturbing it basically rewrote psychology's understanding of obedience. Participants were told they were helping with a learning study and instructed by an authority figure in a lab coat to administer increasingly severe electric shocks to another person whenever they got an answer wrong. The shocks weren't real, and the other person was an actor, but the participants didn't know that. They heard the actor cry out in pain, beg them to stop, and eventually go silent. About 65% of participants continued all the way to the maximum voltage level, labeled on the machine as XXX, simply because an authority figure told them to keep going. Not monsters, regular people. The experiment has been replicated across cultures and decades with broadly similar results. What Milgram showed is that the situation, the authority, the context, the framing matters enormously for behavior. People do not behave based on their character alone. They behave based on their character plus everything surrounding them. Which brings us to the fundamental attribution error, the single most useful concept for understanding why people misjudge other people constantly. When you do something bad, you attribute it to the situation. You were stressed, tired, provoked, having a rough week. When someone else does something bad, you attribute it to their character. They're selfish, lazy, inconsiderate. You are the main character with context. Everyone else is a supporting character acting purely from their personality. This gap in how we explain our own behavior versus other people's is fundamental attribution error, and it is relentless. It drives almost every interpersonal conflict, almost every bad management decision, and a significant portion of political disagreement. Last stop, the two systems running your brain. Daniel Kahneman, who won the Nobel Prize in Economics for work that was actually about psychology, described the brain as running two systems. System 1 is fast, automatic, emotional, intuitive. It's the part that jumps when something startles you, instantly recognizes faces, and fills in the sentence before you finish reading it. System 2 is slow, deliberate, logical, effortful. It's the part that actually works through a maths problem or weighs the pros and cons of a decision. Here's the catch. System 2 is lazy. It is extraordinarily reluctant to engage because thinking is expensive in terms of energy. So System 1 handles the overwhelming majority of your decisions, and System 2 mostly shows up afterward to rationalize whatever System 1 already decided. You feel like you're reasoning your way to conclusions. Most of the time you're feeling your way there, and then constructing the reasoning after the fact. Emotions also have a direct line to your beliefs in a way that skips logic entirely. This is called emotional reasoning. If something feels true, the brain treats it as evidence that it is true. You feel stupid in a lecture, so you conclude you are stupid. You feel like your friend is annoyed at you, so you conclude they definitely are. You feel scared of something, so you conclude it must be dangerous. The feeling isn't evidence, but System 1 doesn't care about that distinction. And because System 2 is busy being lazy, the feeling usually wins the argument before the argument even starts. There's also the self-serving bias, quietly protecting your ego from reality at all times. When you succeed at something, you attribute it to your ability and your effort. When you fail, you attribute it to bad luck, unfair circumstances, or other people getting in your way. This isn't conscious dishonesty, it's automatic ego protection. The brain prefers a version of events where you are competent and the world is unfair over a version where you might actually need to improve. It feels like self-awareness. It is not. Real self-awareness is actively uncomfortable, which is exactly why most people avoid it. And then there's the optimism bias, which is the brain's cheerful refusal to accurately estimate bad things happening to you specifically. Studies consistently show that people know, in the abstract, that roughly half of all marriages end in divorce, that cancer affects a huge portion of the population, that car accidents happen to millions of people every year. But when asked to estimate the likelihood of those things happening to themselves personally, people systematically underestimate, not slightly, significantly. You know bad things happen, you just quietly assume they'll happen to someone else. This is partly why people don't save enough, don't buy insurance early enough, and don't go to the doctor until something is already wrong. The optimism bias keeps you motivated and functional, which is probably why it evolved, but it also keeps you underprepared for the things that will actually go wrong. So where does that leave you? Your perception is a construction, your memory is a reconstruction. Your attention misses more than it catches. Your confidence in your own abilities is inversely correlated with your actual competence in unfamiliar territory. Your decisions are driven by cognitive shortcuts that reliably produce errors. You systematically overestimate your own role in your successes and underestimate it in your failures. You assume bad outcomes are for other people. Your behavior changes dramatically based on who's in the room and who's giving the instructions. And the part of your brain that should be catching all of this is spending most of its energy avoiding the effort. Here's the genuinely useful part, though. Knowing about these biases doesn't make you immune to them, but it does give you the ability to slow down at exactly the moments when your brain wants to sprint. Ask where your information is coming from. Notice when a number was planted before a negotiation. Check if you're sitting through something bad only because you've already invested time in it. Consider whether the confident person in the room has actually earned that confidence. Notice when you're explaining someone else's behavior without their context. Question whether the thing that feels true has any actual evidence behind it, or just the feeling. Ask yourself whether you'd explain your own failure the same way you'd explain someone else's. Your brain is not broken. It's doing exactly what it evolved to do: keep you alive, conserve energy, and navigate a social world at speed. It's just that the modern world is full of situations those shortcuts were never designed for. The bias isn't the problem. Not knowing about the bias is. That's Psychology 101. All the ways your brain is lying to you, more or less, explained fast. If this made you question a decision you've already made, a memory you were certain about, or a belief you've been carrying around for years, hit like.